Hello, and welcome to the Communication Solution Podcast. Here at IFIOC, we love to talk communication. We love to talk motivational interviewing, and we love talking about improving outcomes for individuals, organizations, and the communities that they serve. Today, we've got Casey Jackson on the line, John Gilbert, and I'm Tammy. Welcome to the conversation.
Hello again, everyone. We have a guest today that is going to get into something that if anyone has listened to our podcast on values, focus mountain, all that good stuff, this will be familiar, but you will also expand your mind in some really cool ways. I've got to hear our guest on various podcasts out there. I suggest listening to his work. He has a book as well. He can tell us all about himself. It's Joshua Dittmar, and he is going to tell us about Valuegraphics and what that all means and how we can relate MI to that and how he's doing a lot of massive change at a large level. He's the VP of Valuegraphics Research Company, and he's helping global brands, be it PayPal, Lululemon, Genesis. He's using these value graphics to help with increasing ROI, reducing their risk, and improve some of their outcomes with a research-backed, values-based approach. So we're going to talk about that, how to do that with values, and get into some aspects of how do we think about ethics in relation to discovering people's values, how we're influencing them, and just some of the things around that from an MI perspective, as well as Josh, your perspective as well, more generally from everything you've learned. So anyhow, welcome, Josh. And if you wouldn't mind, I know you have some information you were thinking of sharing about what does this even mean with value graphics and how could people get attuned to it?
Amazing. G'day, guys. Thanks for having me on. And yeah, really looking forward to having a chat about values and a values-driven approach with people who are already living and breathing this stuff. It's always exciting to talk to like-minded folks. Yeah, this amazing database that has originally been created by our founder, David Allison, and a team of researchers out of New Zealand has really given us some powerful tools to not just change businesses, but also, change the world potentially and, help us change the way that we look at each other and see each other from a personal perspective through our values, and instead of just looking and, taking in the world with demographic stereotypes. So lots of fun on the business and profit side, but also being able to make a social impact as well is really helpful. So yeah, I'll start off with a little bit of a story, which will help to provide some context around this massive database that we have. We're accurate in 180 out of 185 countries. There's over 750,000 survey responses that we've collected, all anonymously, and we have 152 different languages that we're able to translate into. And we're super, super accurate, more accurate than you need for a PhD at any university in the world. So for all the stats geeks out there like me, we're accurate to 3.5% with a 95% level of confidence. So that's just super, super accurate with our research. But this whole idea was born out of the thought that every organization on the planet wants to engage and motivate a group of people. Whether it's us on this podcast, we want to get people to come onto the podcast, whether you're Toyota wanting to sell people cars, whether you're a religious organization, you want donations. Every organization wants to get a group of people to do a particular thing. And so, we're all walking around with the question in our heads, how do we get people to do things? How do we get people to do what we want? To buy our products, to come to our shows, come to our events, listen to our podcasts. And we always start off this introduction with a story about three friends in an alley at midnight. So if you can imagine, COVID's ending. We haven't seen our friends for a while. I'm from Australia, living in Canada. You can imagine if I get to see a bunch of Australians come over to Vancouver, Canada, we're going to go out and we're going to have a good time. And we're at the bar and, we haven't seen each other for a long time. There's a lot of, punching in the shoulders, slapping each other, just really enjoying each other's company. And it gets to about 1 or 2 a.m. and we're like, okay, maybe it's time we take the party elsewhere. The bar's closing down. And we're going to walk back to our apartment, and it's you and two other friends, and you start to walk back, and you come across a dark alley, and the first person who's driven by adventure sees this alley, and they think, "Wow, cool! Okay, let's go down this alley. Come on, guys! Like, I love you. This will be lots of fun. It'll be a shortcut. We'll be able to get there quicker. Super exciting." Second friend number 2, who's driven by safety, is like, "This is the worst idea ever. I love you guys. We're not going down this alley, no matter what. That's not happening. Like,
I'm
I love
definitely
you. Let's go back to the bar.
I'm
Get an
def-
Uber.
Yeah.
We're going to go back to the bar. Let's call an Uber. Like, let's get back to the apartment safely. That's all that matters. Friend number 3, who's driven by friendship, is like, guys, I don't care what happens down the alley, back to the bar, whatever happens. As long as I'm with you guys, I love you. I'm cool with whatever happens. So there's 3 different people with 3 different responses in an instant. And it's an instinctual response. It's not like they had to sit there and process, am I 26 to 35? Am I 35 to 46? Like, the numbers, the demographic profiling that we have around everything. Nobody sits there and goes, am I a 6'2" white male? Does that mean that's okay for me to walk down this dark alley? Like that? No, we have an instinctual reaction, and the instinctual reaction comes from our values. Our values determine everything we do. And the way that we market and message and talk to people is through this demographic lens. And it doesn't really make sense. It's a little bit, it's cracked, it's broken. It used to work for us in the past when we had to have certain, back in the day, it was important that you fit a certain role in society and you did a certain thing. But now the world's changed. Our institutions are still kind of back in this olden day way of looking at things, but people have changed. We can go out and you can literally learn anything off your phone. You can become anything that you want, which is fantastic. And it's a part of, we've really got to start talking to people through this value-based lens. And so thankfully there's people out there who, figured this out way before we did, who are a lot smarter than we are. If you think of the science of neuroscience, you think of the prefrontal cortex of your brain, it's like the CEO of your brain, and it has this filter which decides what feels good and what feels bad. I move towards things that feel good. I move away from things that feel bad, and that filter is your values. If we look at things from a psychological perspective, which it sounds like where some of your question comes from, an individual basis, is saying, okay, if I have a person and I can understand their values, I can, maybe do a Myers-Briggs test or, something like that, the Enneagram, or there's all sorts of different ways that you can do it. And you lie on the couch and they're understanding your values and they're going to coach you into getting back in alignment with your values to live a happier life. And then if we look at it from a sociological perspective, which is massive groups of people, why did this group vote Republican? Why did this group vote Democrat? Why did this group move this way? Why did this group move the other way? They're looking at the past. So they're saying, okay, what caused people to do this? And those 3 different, groups of sciences, they don't agree on too much. They bicker about all sorts of things, but they all agree that our values determine everything we do. Our values are the determinant for our behaviors, our actions, and our emotions in our lives. And so we took a little bit from all of these sciences and looking at large groups of people, instead of looking at the past, we're trying to use it as a predictive tool to determine what people will do in the future. And so we're able to go out, we're able to survey people, we're able to look at what drives their lives and use those tools to connect with people and help businesses connect with their customers. Instead of asking the question, who are our people? Is often a question. I think I know. You might have seen a big sign in the front, when you go into the office building, there's a massive sign that says our values are safety, respect, and friendship. And it's like you can kind of tell that someone sat in a boardroom with a box of donuts and made those 3 values up, and they're like, these are our company values. And it doesn't really have anything to do with who decides what that is. And there's this big gap. There's a gap between, okay, we think this is how, the information that we have some demographic information, we have some psychographic information, which is really useful. But how do we make the leap between here and there to saying that it's safety, friendship and respect? What we're doing is we're narrowing the gap so that there's more information. So you can go, oh, like it's personal growth and it's friendship and it's personal development, let's say, for example. And then once you understand that, you can speak to the people in the organization. And we're removing the guesswork is essentially what we're doing.
So on that real quick, that's
Yeah.
really interesting because you brought up psychographics, and that's where I was curious. How are value graphics different? Because, Casey, you could chime in here at some point too of how you develop the focus mountain that we train on, of that there's a finite amount of human cross-cultural values based off of values theory, at least, and that it's harder to why a value, like why that why fulfillment. Well, for quality of life, I guess you could always bring it back. It's like, at what point do you stop and call something a value versus being more of a psychographic. And I was just wondering how you determine the values and what is a value versus what is a preference or a desire. It seems to matter because it seems to
Totally.
define everything.
Totally. So we think of demographics, psychographics, and valuegraphics as a three-legged stool of audience insights. So demographics is a very simplified, oversimplified definitions, just to pre-frame my my next couple of sentences. But demographics kind of define what people are. So, certain age bracket, certain income, where do they live, those sort of things. Like what is this person doing? And, where are they at in their life? Psychographics, we look at it as very simplified, like a record of what people have done in the past. So if we, think about I'm wanting to, sell someone some green tea or sell someone Red Bull, and I know that they drink 2 cups of coffee a day, that's really useful information to know. They're already a caffeine consumer. It's great. They already consume it twice a day, every single day of their lives. It's really, really powerful information to know, but it doesn't inform me how to get them to take an action on switching to green tea or switching to the Red Bull that I'm trying to sell them. And the values are that driver behind it. So just to pre-frame the rest of what I'm going to say is like we've got demographics, what people are, psychographics is a record, and value graphics is the motivator or the driver in their lives. So essentially, it sounds like what you're asking is what makes a value a value? Like how do you determine where we stop with all the other stuff that people talk about? They say, I really value work. I really value money. And you're like, well, those are things, they're not really values.
Mhm.
So, I mean, part of this came out, we have I think it's the World Values Index is that says that there's 40 values. And what we have after doing all of these surveys all around the world, the research team have actually found an extra 16. So if you're a stats geek, that's like finding 16 new pyramids. You're like, oh my goodness, this is crazy. 16 new ways of how people see and move through the world. And that can change from, country to country or region to region. Is how they talk about something can be different. It's not going to be a very concrete answer for you. Like the stats, it's because we've done so many surveys and people talk about things in the same way. They start to group themselves in different ways. And so there's a 2% margin for, a group being created or a segment being created in one way versus another. Let's say, for example, we have an audience called the workaholic investors. These people, like they work and they work and they work, they self-report working 80 hours a week, and they invest all of their money because they really care about status and they really care about building wealth. Then we have another group called the life-driven workers who work and work and work and they self-report 80 hours a week, but they're working for experiences. So one of their highest values is experiences. Now they're like kind of similar groups. They're kind of talking about the same thing, but they're a little bit different. There's different things that drive their lives. When they're talking about status, it's to, move up in the ranks and invest and, all that sort of stuff. It's like a very work focused. But then the life driven people, they're like really just working for experiences. So if you're talking to them about anything in their life, talk to them about experiences rather than about status, you're going to talk to this group versus the other. So they're very, very close, but there's like these slight differences. And so when we do so many surveys over and over again and have, thousands and thousands of different codes of what separates people, it starts to bleed itself out. So it's kind of like a mass, like how many people we've done allows us to group them in this way. It wasn't as clear at the start, and it's become clearer and clearer and clearer once we had hit a mass critical number.
So then that's to say that you are able to put them into, if you really wanted to, overlapping or different, like 56 different values or something like that you could label, and then from that place you have a sense of this bucket with these people with these values, this bucket for this people with these values, and there might be some overlap in there, but there's like a Venn diagram differentiation depending on.
Perfect. Yeah, we use Venn diagrams like all of the time as a perfect example. What's really cool is when you see people like exactly what you're saying, and they'll talk about something in a different way. So like I'm family driven, I'm working for my family, or I'm working for status. There are 56 values, which is fantastic that we have this finite number of values, makes it a lot simpler. But everyone talks about them in different ways. But the cool thing is we see the same types of people show up in different parts of the world.
So where I'd be curious to transition is into the influence part of it. But before we do, I just want to highlight, like, we get into, especially in our advanced training for motivational interviewing that we do, we get into values-based activities of trying to understand and discover someone's values beyond the behavior, such as drug use or something that someone might see as negative or antisocial, and find the value, the driver, like you're talking about, behind it, or the other happier, healthier value that they want to be different in their life and reconnecting with their family or something, but the value being that sense of connection or contribution. So in that way, we get into that in our advanced training to help identify values and then help people align. And that's where there seems to be an overlap here with us. It's helping people, we're influencing people to help them align with their values. Now, there is, as Dr. Terry Moyers and other people would say, there's an aspiration there that we're trying to help them do something, right? It seems like maybe there could be something different, at least how I was interpreting what you were talking about, that I've heard other people talk about. We're always in sales. We're always trying to get people to do something we want. It does seem that there could be a difference of influence in that in MI, we're trying to, as ethically, unbiasedly as possible, help them get to where they want to go in the cultural context of, compliance if it's antisocial and they're a sociopath or psychopath. But we're trying to help them align their behaviors with their values is the desire, versus get them to do this particular kind of a thing. And so I'm wondering your thoughts when you're thinking about values and helping them align their behaviors with their values. How have you thought about it in your own, that, okay, I'm being ethical about what I'm doing in the world and I'm helping these companies do this in a way that might lead to these sales things, but I know that for me, I figured out a way to navigate this ethically for myself and for how I'm helping people. I'm just wondering your thoughts on that.
Yeah, totally. Great question, man. And I think that it is an important question that we talk about all the time. And since we very first started, like David and our head researcher, this is a thing for good. This isn't, because it can be used for bad. If once you understand people's drivers, you can influence them to do, if you can spin a message in a way that, influences them. Like, for example, Cambridge Analytica, which also took people's information. I started talking about how we do things anonymously. Like, we have no information about anybody that's answered the surveys. So we have their demographics, and we always get the right audiences, and we have the right amount of people, but we don't know where they live, what their contact details are, or anything like that, which is very important for one part of it. But also just working with good companies. We've been approached by a couple of companies and government organizations and said, that's not what we do. We don't dip into politics or anything like that. And it was important for us to sort of set the groundwork of how the business is going to move forward. Because as far as we know, this is the first that has ever been created, the first, massive library of people's values around the world, which can be used as a tool for good. Amazing, lots of, finding the intersection between profit and purpose for businesses, which impacts people, from inside the organization and outside, but also having a very firm line of, these are the companies we don't work with, and staying out of politics is a good smart move.
I know I didn't even think of politics. That's such a good point. Not that, yeah, I want to share any opinions or anything, but yeah, that is such a good point that it could even be used for politics.
And the dream state would be, I mean, imagine, we have the values for the United States and Canada and Australia. And it's like, what if our politicians were held to the standard of our country's values and not by other things? It would be amazing. And, what if we were moving towards the things that, because these things matter to us, like belonging in the States is value number one, whereas family is value number one in Canada and belonging is second. And so, and you can kind of see there's slight differences. Is like belonging, being an American is like really, really important, and it's like less so in Canada. It's like, we're like, yeah, everyone up here is like, yeah, family, and like way more. There's a different feel to the country, and you, as they filter down, like, those are just the top two examples, but as they filter down, you can see the differences in the countries, and you can see the differences in, China, Afghanistan, France, Australia,
Well, and this is interesting too, because what went through my mind is this paper that I came across when I was researching some stuff for a partner we were working with that related to kind of like some things that Casey you'll talk about, of like if someone has zero point 0.0 ambivalence, MI is not indicated, it can't work. If there's like zero point 0.0 ambivalence, right, about whatever the topic is. To inform that related to values is something called cultural constructivism. And so there's a paper that talks about cultural constructivism and motivational interviewing, and how you can help people align with certain things if they come from a certain culture. And it's more easy to talk about like certain cultures that might be less pro-social, so that are more violent or something like that, to then say, oh, well, if we help them in these ways, we might be helping them perpetuate a certain belief system about, sexism, racism, whatever it's going to be. So how does cultural constructivism fit in, to that? And so I guess where I'm going with this for you is at a certain point, let's say we have that ideal of, we have these value graphics, and politicians are holding back on using that to manipulate the masses in this hypothetical utopia we're talking about. And in that process, we're going to have some, again, Venn diagram overlaps and not. So I'm wondering, is the goal of this with companies and working with someone, with friends, to like focus on the strengths overlap, like a strengths finder or something, where you focus on the overlap? If you were going to work with someone that doesn't have the same values, I'm thinking about it on an individual level too. If you're having a lot of triggers, as we call writing reflexes, where do you focus if you're noticing like values are different, but we share some of these? Do you focus on these, or do you do anything with the separation of values and have discussion around that? It's just some thoughts that I was thinking as you were talking about the different cultures.
Yeah, love it. I mean, you're totally on our page. Like something that we do, it was one of the most common projects that we'll do with a company is like, what do our people care about? What do our competitors care about? And what do the prospects care about? And then looking at what are the, to be able to, at the same time as solidifying our own base, how do we steal market share from the competitors? And also, how do we get people who don't know, who aren't using either? And then, like you said, you got this Venn diagram piece in the middle. They're the values that you talk to. And if you just wanted to do a program about prospects who don't use either you or the competitors, then these are the values that make them unique, the ones that are outside of the center of the Venn diagram. And this can be done from, we did a massive survey on high performing call center workers versus low performing call center workers. And so we looked at, this was a global study we did for Genesis. Every call center software you can imagine gets used by basically any company in the planet is like through Genesis. So these guys are gigantic, and they wanted to do this like surveys, like how do we talk to the high performers and how do we get more of them when we're doing hiring and recruitment, and how do we engage them more? And we're able to see the low performers, the average performers, and the high performers, and then what are the things that make them similar, and then what are the things that make the high performers different, and how do we talk to them so we can now change the culture subtly to engage those people more and get them, and encourage more to come on and stay longer, and recruitment and all that sort of stuff. So that that Venn diagram image that you were thinking of can be split in so many different ways. And you can look at it, like you said, from a central perspective, what makes them similar? How do we talk to everyone? And what makes them different? How do we just talk to this particular audience?
Hmm.
I started my career in sales. And so as I learned about sales, it was a question that I was like, what am I doing here? You'd read sales books and, do all these courses and stuff like that. There's a really beautiful book by a guy called Chris Voss. It's called Never Split the Difference. Oh man, that guy is incredible. Just amazing. But he talks about it as like people want to be spoken to like this. He's like, like when someone sells to me like this, not a pushy way, not a pressury way, like he talks in this way that makes you feel like you're important, and then you buy the product and you feel good about it. Like I used to teach sales, and I used to say the only difference between a good sale and a bad sale, or a good purchase and a bad purchase, is how you feel about it. I might buy an amazing product, like my new iPhone, and obviously this is a very, like, sometimes you buy a bad product that's bad for you. It's like, that's a bad sale. But, from a from a very simplified perspective, I go and buy an iPhone that I buy every single year because I'm getting an upgrade and it's basically the same phone. Is like if I have a good experience with the person at the checkout, I'm like, wow, I love it. It sticks with me. I remember the phone. I remember the experience. If I have a bad experience, even if the phone's a little bit better, I'm like, man, screw these guys. Like, I didn't enjoy that experience. I didn't have a good time. And I wasn't, in my words, sold well. And so it's a fine line. Maybe I was manipulated. Maybe I was sold well. But it really comes down, I think, good product versus bad product. Are you doing good in the world or bad in the world? And there's also like a line of being like, are you forcing something, doing a classic, stereotypical car salesman sales manipulation tactic to sell someone a car, or are you selling them a car that they need in their lives? It's it's a tricky question to answer, and I think it's a good moral discussion that we could talk about for like hours, I think, with examples. And I love the discussion because I went through that same process, as I got older and as I went further and further in sales. I was like, well, am I doing the right thing? Like, what if you get taught a line, to use, and you're like, it didn't feel very good. Like that felt a bit greasy. But what's the outcome? Like, sometimes I have my own biases when I'm being sold something, but I want someone to overcome it. I don't know how to overcome that myself, and a good salesperson will overcome that, and they'll get the product in my hands, and it will be for my benefit.
Mhm.
So
Wow.
there's
That's
a
really interesting for me, Josh, because it makes me think of therapy or counselors or people that learn MI, like we will, and then all of a sudden they learn that people are using active listening and the awareness comes up. And then if you have a therapist, you now can understand some of what your therapist is doing and you can break it down. And then it almost like that bias like puts up a wall almost rather than makes it easier. So if they can overcome that with a sense of genuine, authentic, whatever you want to call that,
Mhm.
there's something there to break past bias. And I think it's breaking past the bias. We all have unconscious biases, implicit biases. I have them right now. All that is happening, but how can you try to speak, I don't know, to some sort of truth in the other person, with trying to take your bias, your conflict of interest out of it as much as possible? That's to me some sort of guiding light in there, that be it a therapist and knowing another therapist is using therapy with them, or a salesperson and another person that is selling to them. How do you get through to the human underneath it?
Mhm. Totally. Yeah, I think like that's a part of life, is like, are we going, doing good or doing bad, and figuring out what that means from these things are fashioned onto us from a cultural perspective. And if we move to a different culture, someone might say what we're doing that we think is good is bad. And so it's like really just trying to it's really fun moral conversation, isn't it? Like I've really feel like we could sit here for a long time and flesh it out, because there'd be things that inside of each of us as individuals we think is the right thing and the wrong thing. And I think that yeah, I think that if we're moving forward generally in a better, people with less pain, happier people, businesses are more aligned with people rather than just being profit focused. I talked about businesses are trying to look for this place between the intersection between profit and purpose. And there seems to be this idea that you can only have one and not the other. And what we think is that the intersection between the two is a values driven path. And when we're able to impact businesses, we're able to impact, because businesses influence everybody, they impact everybody. Whether it's the stuff we buy off Amazon, the computers in front of us, like we're all purchasing. Everything was thought up by somebody in a room somewhere for it to be a particular way. Like someone designed the microphone and the headphones. And I think if we change the thinking at that level to be more about what do the people care about that we're building this for, I think that generally we're building a better world.
So this is interesting because it is such a challenging balance. But to your point, Josh, like I'm thinking about like one of our big people that is engaged with us is law enforcement. So there's people that are trying to make a really good difference out there and a really good impact. And so like I was thinking of David, who is one of our main people in our MI Plus membership that is engaged with us. He uses motivational interviewing to help people understand hearing and how they can
Hmm.
hear literally. physically hear better, but people typically struggle with getting, for instance, hearing aids so they can hear conversations. So, I
Right.
mean, like, again, value graphics in that sense, like, oh my gosh, you were helping people be more engaged in the world by being able to hear better. So it is tricky navigating this because, yeah, I'd say that would be an ethical influence that would be really good to help people be able to hear better
Mm-hmm.
or get the medical needs that they need.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. Like in Never Split the Difference, Chris Voss talks about this example of where this doctor was like, he would just have patients like leave, and they're like, he's like, this is your last chance. Like, you basically have cancer, you're gonna die if you don't change your lifestyle. And then they go out and they're like, yeah, I hear you. Oh my god, I'm gonna change my lifestyle. And they go out and they don't change their lifestyle. And it's like, there's him in his way is being like, that is explaining essentially, when they're saying this, they're not talking to what matters for the patient. They just say the same stuff, and the patient's like, yeah, absolutely, I'll change my life. This is so scary. But they're not talking about what drives their life, you know? And so it's like, from an individual perspective, like you were talking about with the hearing aid example, is like, how do we influence people to go and, make these changes? Because sometimes it can be a do or die situation and they don't do it. We're not getting to the core of what matters and drives their lives.
This, Josh, was something that I wanted to bring up before we wrap up with our time. And I know we're coming closer to the end of it, but is this sense of competing values. And I'm wondering if you've dug into this at the massive scale you have. I know for ways that we have talked about it in our training, it could be like a value like Tammy brought up of my independence and having my sense of independence and not being dependent on some sort of vice or something external, or could be a medication in the case of the physician type example or healthcare example. I don't want to be dependent on this thing. I'm independent, right? A very Western, especially American
Mm-hmm.
focused like value in this way. And so then that can compete with this sense of, you could say, more transcendently quality of life, or Tammy, you were saying engagement or connection with others. And so there are these competing values of independence and maybe their sense of connection, and they're now competing to make a decision, just like we all do, especially with the example you gave of consuming a toxin of alcohol and lubricating and having a good time socially, but it not being healthy. But we make those negotiations of life, and
Absolutely.
different people have to make different ones depending on your socioeconomic status and the opportunities that aren't equal. Everyone's making these negotiations of sorts of values. So I was just wondering about how much you focused on that, your just thoughts on that, on how people have competing values, and maybe all you're doing is just identifying them. I shouldn't say just, maybe you're identifying them and that's it. Or then what do you do if you are going to do something with competing values from the values graphics perspective when you're helping people?
That is such a good question. I'll talk from a personal experience, and then I'll share a little bit from a larger scale. So I belong to a segment or an audience called the personal growth junkies, which is like, we've got different names for all the different segments and audiences that come up. When you do my value graphics profile, like, I'm like, personal growth and experiences are at the top of my list. Everything else is like personal growth, experiences, health and well-being, and there's environmentalism and some stuff, just below that. But those two things just drive everything in my life. And so sometimes I'll be having a moral conversation with David about being like, man, like, what about the planet? Because I do like organized cleanups on our local mountains and all this sort of stuff. And I'm like, but this doesn't seem to like be making the biggest difference. I'm like, should I be just focusing 100% of my energy on value graphics because we can actually change the world? But then there's trash on my local mountain and I need to go and do this thing. And so there's two values that are just crashing together. I'm like, okay, and they both give me personal growth. They both give me an experience. And so I'm wrestling. And what, David has done is he just talks with me about it, and he manages to sell me essentially, or explain in a way and help me understand my own which one is going to meet my values the most, essentially. Because in that moment, I don't have an understanding of what's going to make the biggest difference. I'm like, is it the environment and this thing in the moment, or is it the investment? And, I feel like I'm giving up on one of my experiences. So I'm wrestling between these two values. And a part of that from a larger scale is if we see two values like experiences and personal growth at the top, how do we talk to both of those values at the same time with a message? Because we all probably have those moments in our lives where we're like, do I go left? Do I go right? Oh my God, they both feel so good, but they both like, I'm going to feel like I'm missing out if I go one way and not the other. And it seems to come down to how it's explained and how we perceive it. And sometimes that can take some time.
What you just articulated there is what motivational reviewing is to help people work through those dilemmas. That right there is, I mean, that if we just took that excerpt and you put it on a wall for people that are trained in motivational interviewing, they're like, oh yeah, that's what we do in motivational interviewing, is help people work through that.
Yeah.
Because there's not a right or a wrong. It really is how do you help people they resolve their ambivalence based on their own value set. And that's where they're going to find the sense of peace or settlement from that.
Yeah. Yeah. And going back to that, person who leaves the hospital and takes an action or doesn't, is like, how did they see that moment? How did they perceive that moment? And that's like you're saying, it's through our values. How are we receiving this information? How is the story being told to us? Because we're being told stories every day and we're telling stories to other people, when we talk to them. And it's like, are we the 5 out of the 6 keys match up or only 3 out of the 6? And it just didn't really land.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as we're coming to an end, it reminds me of like a Stanford model of behavior change too. It's one of the 4 quadrants, and unfortunately, I can't remember the researchers or the name of the model, so it's a bit ridiculous to even mention it in that way. But I remember motivational interviewing sticking in one of the quadrants of this one-on-one, kind of like you're talking about with this physician interaction. And then, Casey, that you brought up from years ago, that book that talked about extra therapeutic factors and just how many things outside of that interaction affect change. And so I appreciate what you're doing in the world and talking to that point of us having these, laptops and these things that are going to influence us around products and things that businesses are going to remain. So how are they influencing us consciously or unconsciously? And I think there's something important to be aware of in culture and get more and more seen values in companies, in people. And in so doing, you can, from all the biases I have and what I've learned with Casey and digging into this, you can transcend some of the behaviors to see the humanity in what's going on. And it seems like there's a there that if we work towards that together, there's going to be some disagreements and there's going to be some stuff that might be like, I would choose this over that. But if we can keep working towards something like that, it seems like it would bring us together in some sort of a way. And there's a there that I don't know, because it's going to be perceived differently by different cultures. But whatever that is, it seems worthwhile. And that's what I appreciate what that Valuegraphics is doing. And then I, of course, in this utopia, see MI coming in to help people once there is that sense of it. I also see, cultural constructivism and that coming into schools to help inform at a young age. I see emotional intelligence coming into that picture to help with perception of other emotions. And I see this foray of just all these things coming into like schools and this amazing society that could be values driven, that could have this information to make a decision. But it doesn't mean that we always are going to make this decision of choosing values graphics over cleaning your local hill. And that's where I think that conflict of interest, we all have to check inside ourselves, our own bias, to be like, well, I think you should do the values graphic things because of these things, but you're thinking the thing. So how do I sell you and explain this to you in a way to get you to make the decision I want you to make in this, Josh? I think that's what we got to check as we move forward with all this. And that's what we, call the writing reflex in motivational interviewing, getting out of equal position. We have podcasts that talk about how do you maintain equipoise but still influence. But I think that's the key check for me when I think of the ethics of all this. How do we try to check that but still work in this future direction together with being values-based? So those are just some ending thoughts I have. I don't know, for Josh, Casey, Tammy, anything else that you wanted to throw in with or add?
When you said that, go ahead, Josh.
No, you go for it.
What I was thinking about, my aha moment, it's fun for me in the podcast to have aha moments with this, is I'll admit I came into this podcast with I was braced and ready for, I'm not sure where this is going to go, how much, because I'm so anti-manipulation. It's just, I just don't like to be played and I don't like people being played. And, that's my social worker side of myself. But the thing that I can deeply appreciate, it was my aha moment actually in working with Tammy's company when Tammy wasn't with us on the sales side of things, is what struck me so profoundly. And I think this is where my brain really understands the potential of value graphics, is what I realized from a social worker perspective, looking through a sales lens, was that if you have an exceptional product, you really don't need a sales department. You really need a good marketing department if you have an exceptional product. And I think that's where I see value graphics like, oh, this makes sense to me. Because if we just market it well, we just have people standing by to collect the orders then. Because good marketing will help them resolve their ambivalence based on their own value set, which is different than cold calling and trying to sell stuff to people that they may or may not want. And I think that's probably too rudimentary and oversimplified. But for me, I think that's what was helpful through this conversation, is it really reinforces my belief that if it's an exceptional product, who wouldn't want it? Like if that fits their values and it fits their lifestyle, I want exceptional products, but I just don't want to be sold anything. And I think that's what helps me in this dialogue, listening to what you talked about, Josh, is that helps delineate between the sales side and the marketing side from a kind of sales perspective. But when you step back and look from the value side of it, it's like, well, you're helping people that really would find the product, value added in their life, get access to that in a way their brain can, comprehend it in a way that lines up with their own value set. So that I really appreciate this, because it helped me make clear about certain things that still were a little fuzzy in my brain, just in the way that I look at how I communicate and talk and about what we do as well too.
Yeah, totally.
Mm-hmm.
If we can change the way, like this is bigger than, us. It's bigger than, if we can change the way that we look at each other, instead of, we're programmed to look demographically. We're programmed to see someone look a certain way in the desert and be like, okay, that person's going to kill me. I'm going to run away. And, we don't live in that world very much anymore. We still do to some extent, but what we're really doing is we're trying to, we're not going to cure racism, homophobia, ageism, and all these things. But if we can turn the dial down from where it's at right now, what it seems like is an 11 out of 10, if we can help to turn the dial down to a 7 or an 8, hopefully even lower, I think that's building a better world. If we can start to look at each other through a value graphic lens and say, like these people are more like me than they look, then we can really start to, create a more cohesive and a better world. And it comes from changing the way that we look at each other. And that's really at the core of what, besides better businesses, intersection between profit and purpose and all that stuff, like that's really what we're driving for and what we're hoping for. And it sounds like you guys are doing the same as well. So
100%. 100%. And that's, it's fun to listen to other people out there in that charge, with that mission.
Totally. With the level of massive impact you're having. Thank you for what you do. And yeah, it's like obviously leading a lot of helpful things at a massive level. We're going to, keep as individual and organizational change, as our institute is called, keep that going. Mm-hmm. And I'll just point to some degree of motivational interviewing being a way to help with this for anyone that hasn't gone through that. I just want to throw that out there for intro, advanced training, or whatever it would be it with us or otherwise. We have our own resources we provide. But I just want to mention that because it's a way of discovering someone and co-discovering things within them. But more importantly, to your point, Josh, I perceive it as a way of seeing and treating another human. And in seeing them in a different light, I now can see the humanity and transcend the demographics more. And the values are one way to do that. And hopefully in that process, given we're in a capitalistic culture currently, that will relate to more, not just conscious capitalism, but compassionate capitalism that, yes, is values driven with a place of compassion, which I think is what we can all kind of attune to, that bringing it together from what Dr. Bill Miller and Stephen Rolnick put in the third edition of motivational interviewing, is that place of compassion and coming from that place. So I think as long as we got that as our guiding light, we're going to end up somewhere good. So Josh, I can't thank you enough. I know that we had talked beforehand. If people are interested in your work or reaching out to you, where can they find you? What is some information related to that?
Yeah, if you just search Value Graphics, we are everywhere. possible, where you can find Valuegraphics on Google, LinkedIn, Facebook, all the stuff. And then if you want to shoot me a line, it's just josh@valuegraphics.com. You'll hear from our assistant Abigail, and she can guide you wherever you want to go.
Wonderful. Well, is there anything
Sounds good.
else that you'd like to add, or anything for closing thoughts, or anyone else that they'd like to add before we wrap up?
Yeah, I just think like looking at your own life and seeing how different the people are that are in it, and just looking at your own life and be like, wow, I'm already living a values-driven life, because the people around me are around me not because they look, sound, and smell exactly like me. They're around me because we talk about the same things and we care about the same things in our lives. You can look around in your life and appreciate how I think things sound worse than they are if we listen to the media, and if you're on the social media or whatever, like things sound worse than they are. And I think that people are really coming together and we're moving forward in a beautiful way that is more conducive to, peace and togetherness. Togetherness is, the togetherness values, there's 5 of them: family, relationships, friendship, community, and love. And those 5 values are what, they show up in a different way everywhere around the world in the top 10. So sometimes it's community and relationships, sometimes it's friendship, but they show up at the top 10 everywhere in the world in some different variation. And these are the things that make us human. Human beings love being together. And if you just look around in your life, you can see that you're already living a values-driven life.
Thank you for sharing that. Ian, thanks for being on here. This was wonderful. Hope we get a chance to talk again.
Yes.
Thanks,
all right.
guys.
Well, hopefully you all got to enjoy that, are listening to this, and you know where to find Josh. You know where to find us at ifioc.com, and all sorts of resources if you want to see people from this light. We are one way to do that, and another way is through Valuegraphics. So hopefully it's been well. Josh, powerful closing comments. Thank you, and take care, everyone. See you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Communication Solution Podcast. As always, this podcast is all about you. So if you have questions, thoughts, topic suggestions, ideas, please send them our way at casey@ifioc.com. That's CASEY@ifioc.com. For more resources, feel free to check out ifioc.com. We also have a public Facebook group called Motivational Interviewing Every Day. We have an amazing blog, and we have lots of communication tips on our website. In addition to all these amazing resources, we do offer online public courses on our website on motivational interviewing and effective communication strategies. Thanks for listening to the Communication Solution by IFIOC.